Here follows an extract from my book Fête Fatale, available from Amazon. Chapter 7, Part 2. Detective Chief Inspector James laced up his walking boots and made his way to the funeral director's. Hardly had the door closed behind him when Beth picked up the telephone and scrolled through the contacts list to select P for Pepper. "Hello, Carlton. I wonder if you're free to quickly help me out in something of a covert operation." She explained the situation, and it wasn't long before Carlton was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked as though he was absent-mindedly tapping away at the keyboard in a haphazard manner as Drew walked into the kitchen for a tea break. Carlton began to plug an external hard drive into the laptop and was soon sitting back contentedly in his chair as the files copied over. The atmosphere lightened at the prospect of a done deed, and as the files flew across the cable, Carlton and Beth made a joint effort of explaining the situation to Drew. Carlton explained that there was no need for him to actually see any of the content on the computer. In fact, he had made sure not to read anything. He had merely created a carbon copy of what was on the computer and stored it onto the external hard drive. Once he had shut everything down, it would be as if he'd never been there. "When your brother's finished with it all, could he please return the hard drive? He could either wipe the contents before he sent it back, or I'll do it without reading anything. There's no rush though, tell him to take his time," said Carlton. "Goodness, such espionage at the humble breakfast table," said Drew. "I wash my hands of the lot of you." He smiled as he said this, which belied his intention to get well and truly into the heart of the matter. "I suppose that it's just a shortcut, really. We know that Carlton is as discreet as they come. I guess it's okay. How come your brother's involved in all of this? What's there to do?" Beth explained the query regarding the cause of John's death and the appearance of the name of Jefferson in the diary. "Conrad Jefferson, you say? He's a decent enough fellow. He's got a massive property portfolio and runs a building company. Elitist stuff, not your usual housing estate developer. I do artistic impressions of his architectural plans from time to time. He's very clever, a bit too smart sometimes, and I think he was in prison for a while, but I've never had any trouble from him." "I thought I'd seen his face before. He came to the fête with what I assumed was his wife. I didn't realise who he was, though." "I'll be hurrying along before your brother gets back, just for form's sake. We don't want any awkward overlap, do we? Nevertheless, tell him I say hi," said Carlton. As Benedict was walking to Bruff's, his mobile phone bleeped to tell him that the forensic team was nearly finished. In reality, this comprised a few members of the department that were bursting to get out of the office. Just one person would have been sufficient, but they cheekily assured Detective Chief Inspector James that more was necessary for protocol, and they wanted him to have the best service possible. They assured him that they fully understood his need for prompt action and had sensibly employed the flashing blue lights for the whole drive there. Nothing was too much trouble. "Well now, that's very reassuring. Just make sure you maintain the same attitude and get the results back to me with the same lightning speed," said James. "Of course, sir. But you do realise that Petri dishes don't have accelerators or blue lights," replied Forbes, the bravest of the team. "Silly me. Nevertheless, unless you want a long stint of office work, I suggest that you invent some. Now that you've begun with such gusto, I expect it to continue," said James. He clapped the likeable rogue across the shoulders and walked with him to the funeral parlour's morgue. Benedict James knew Fred Bruff through many years of visiting his sister and joining in on the edge of village life. A round of conversational pleasantries was the precursor to the grittier aspect of the visit. Bruff's staff was sensible, professional, and the epitome of discretion. After being asked to leave John's body as it had been found, they didn't need any further explanation. Nobody asked questions and they simply got on with their other work. Apart from moving John into a horizontal position, everything had stayed as it was and had been left well alone until they were told to do otherwise. John was brought out to them on a stainless steel trolley. His eyelids were still open and his eyes were still gazing strangely upward. The flush of blood to his face, which had suggested a heart attack to Dr. Wainwright, was still evident, but had settled as he had lain. Forbes explained that samples of fibre from John's clothing and matter from under his nails had been bagged, more as a matter of form than for any particular reason. I thought that as we don't really know what we're looking for, too many specimens is better than too few. We can discard what we don't need, but we can't come back for more when it's too late, he said. Good man. I don't know if we're looking for anything at all, but you're right. Log down anything at all that you find, whether you think it's of interest or not, said James. We've garnered what traces we could, even if they might now be contaminated, and we've had to cut through the garments so that we don't disturb the body. We've taken blood samples from the femoral artery and we've catheterised urine samples. We've also taken swabs from the mouth and nasal cavity and some hair samples, including the roots. Other than that, the only thing we can do is take some photographs with the clothing removed. After that, it's a full autopsy. Do you want some snaps taking, sir? I think you might as well. If you've got what you need from the clothing, there's no need to keep him in rags. You might as well take some pictures while you're at it. Let me know if you find anything of interest. I'm trusting you to apply the blue lights again, and I don't just mean as you drive home. We'll do our best, sir. James went to thank Fred for his help and to also ask for more. Can you keep him here for a bit longer, please, Fred? I can't release the body for burial just yet, but I don't really want him moved to the police morgue to then have to bring him straight back. I also don't want to set tongues wagging by carting the body off. If you start running out of space or if it becomes an inconvenience, just call me. Hopefully it won't be for too long. I just want to satisfy a few question marks for now. We're not expecting to be busy at this time. You know how it gets busy at the end of winter or during a particularly hot summer, but we're hoping to enjoy a bit of a lull for the moment. There's no rush at all as far as I'm concerned, and I agree it's better John's body stays here. I presume that you want him untouched still. I'll sidestep any questions, and I don't think Jean is keen to view the body again, so all shall be quiet on the home front, said Fred. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Fred. The team have bagged up the clothing, so I'll leave it all in your capable hands to cover him appropriately. DCI James rallied his troops. He knew that some of these tests took weeks to garner results, but the sooner they could get started, the sooner he'd know how matters stood. A thought struck him. It was a pity that Beth didn't know any toxicologists that she could conscript. She had always had an uncanny flair for networking people together and had made herself very popular by introducing friends and acquaintances. Quite a few marriages owed their origins to her subtly disguised guidance, and no small number of business partners had met and materially flourished under her discreet influence. Now the criminal justice system was being fast-tracked by her guiding hand. In the domestic setting, her skills were overlooked. But if she ever chose to move into more executive circles, she would be a formidable force. Only Benedict and Drew had ever openly discussed this with Beth, but she always minimised her influence and said that village life suited her best. She said that she felt like the business world was a let's pretend environment and much preferred the grittier subject of village life as the arena to work within. Benedict thought of his grandmother after the war. All of her intellectual achievements were sunk from notoriety and acclaim was far from her mind. Who would ever really know how many lives she had saved through her perceptive reading of codes and systems within enemy communication? For the rest of her life, all of her efforts were focused around nurturing a healthy intellect and a passion for problem solving in her children. Beth was just like her gran, using her skills for the benefit of others without tribute or applause. It was such strength that made him really respect the women he knew. He was sure that most of the men he worked couldn't stand to work in such anonymity. He thought that his gran would be pleased with her legacy. Thankfully, they were no longer living in a time of war, but he hoped that they were still putting their skills to good use. The thought of another broken code quickened his pace as he hurried to see what awaited him at Beth's. For the full book of Fête Fatale, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.